What I've realized is that the greatest thinkers of a generation often have the greatest state of mind towards their work. My favorite author of all time, the great Malcolm Gladwell, is no different. After plowing through his books, TED Talks, and interviews, I realized a mindset that Malcolm Gladwell created through decades of being an award-winning journalist and writer. I call it the Malcolm Gladwell effect, and in this piece I'll explain how it changed my life and how it will change yours too.
Deeply misleading. So the thing about
They
the
weren't
great
friends?
paradox of Friends is if you try and describe the plot of an episode, it's like impossible. It's like if you diagrammed it on a flowchart, it would take up pages. You know, Monica does this, and like Phoebe, and then Rachel goes off in this direction. But no one has ever watched an episode of Friends that at the end said, you know, they lost me. Right? Never happens. So the question is, why? What's this? How do you explain this paradox? And the explanation is that everyone on Friends is perfectly matched. When Ross is perplexed, as he often is, he looks exactly like a perplexed person is supposed to look. So like you watch a show, you can turn the sound off. I've done this. Turn the sound off on an episode you haven't seen before, and then at the end of it, ask yourself, did I know what was going on? Totally.
You will know what's going on.
Nobody watches an episode of Friends and thinks of anything useful by the end, except Malcolm Gladwell. If you've read any of his books, you know exactly what I'm getting at. In Outlier is the first book I read by him. He starts the book with a story about a town of Italians living in America with an astoundingly low rate of heart disease. Later in the book, he talks about the smartest man in America, Chris Langham, the most successful Jewish lawyers living in New York City, studies on intelligence and success in relation to income disparity in children, and the most dangerous airline in the world, Korean Airlines, is along with a dozen other shocking, interesting, and somehow all related stories. When I finished reading the book, I couldn't believe how one person could know that all these stories existed. The book is packed with the most fascinating stories I've ever heard. What's amazing is that in every interview I've seen since, he's telling stories left and right, just like they're at the front of his mind. Stories he doesn't even mention in his books, ones he says he's just heard of recently. So the question arose in my mind, how does someone learn so much in their field? If you stop to think about it, it really is amazing. You can't just be coming across these stories by chance. It's also inspiring to think about because he's acquired a net worth of $30 million from just retelling stories that already exist. The only thing he's really doing is finding these stories. He's a storyteller, but truly a story finder. The basis behind the Malcolm Gladwell effect doesn't only apply to being a journalist like he once was, or a writer like he is now. It's a method that I derived from his work to find more out of life, to progress your work and actually move your focus onto the present. It's simple, which is why it worked for me. The Malcolm Gladwell effect starts with a thought experiment. Imagine you're on an expedition. Let's say you're in a jungle, and your goal is to obviously learn as much as you can about this environment. How would you look at the world in front of you? There's no place you're headed, you're already here. Your goal is now to look under each leaf, branch, and rock to discover something new to you. This state of mind is about having the initiative and interest to be aware of the novelty that surrounds you. Anyone could surely power walk through the same jungle you're in and leave knowing just as much as they came in with. But others could take the same surroundings and with the mindset Malcolm Gladwell hiked in there with, find something they never set out to search for. That's the point of this. You aren't on a journey to find an answer. You're on an expedition. You're in a new territory. You don't know what you're looking for. If you've ever read any of Lewis and Clark's journals, you'd remember the most unmemorable, minute details of the trip they chose to write down. And it makes sense. You know, they're in a foreign place to them, and they didn't want to miss anything. So how does a physical expedition connect to our own lives? Well, Malcolm Gladwell makes a living by finding stories and writing books. What he seems to have found is that by searching under every leaf, under every branch in your own life, you're able to get more out of it. He's realized that the more he learns, the better off he'll be for creating his next book. You bring the focus onto learning from what's already existing in front of you. On YouTube, in movies, on the train, anywhere, our world is filled with information that often goes unnoticed. This channel state of mind is still extremely new, and it was clear to me that I don't need to figure out every part of this journey before starting. What I did want to figure out was the correct mindset. I was terrified of getting burnt out like I had with other large projects in the past. You know, taking it too seriously, or worst of all, staying up till 4 a.m. every night grinding this channel, and because the amount of work doesn't correlate directly to the outcome, the whole thing just not paying off. But I decided before I posted my first video that the only mindset I want to have for this channel is to really practice the Malcolm Gladwell effect. In a large way, what I create and hope to continue to create on this channel is heavily inspired by Malcolm Gladwell. His job as a journalist and then as a writer was to keep learning with the hope that something he'd learned could become a story. If I'm able to turn this channel into a career, then my job would be something extremely similar. I'm just in love with the idea of learning to create and this cycle never stopping. What really excites me about this idea is just how much it encompasses. To be focused on the search instead of the result gives light to the idea of each moment mattering. Sometimes there isn't anything anchoring us in the present, making it just too easy to miss out on the fascinations of life and of life itself. But if you truly reside in the present, you say yes more. It pushes your creativity forward, and you've nowhere you'd rather be than right here. So what if your life felt like an expedition? What if you paid closer attention to what's already around you? Through starting my projects during the last year, and especially with this channel, my focus is on learning in the present and creating. The state of mind that has developed from this intention feels like it's entirely changed my life. If and hopefully when this channel is successful and I'm looking back at how I got to where I am, I'd expect that this mindset, this subtle change in how I view the world, will be largely responsible for any success of state of mind. Also, just for an update, we're about to cross 100 subscribers. Not a crazy milestone or anything, I know, but it's pretty cool because, I actually know all of these 100 people. I have a lot of sick videos coming out soon, so if you're not already subscribed, then consider sticking around. That's all for now. I'll see you in the next one.